Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to explore a book that has really, truly changed how many people think about getting things done and, well, living effectively. Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Hmm.
And just so you know, this deep dive is brought to you by Pankaj Shrestha, and both of us here are actually part of his team.
That's right. Punkish is a strategy consultant, and he's really passionate about helping people and organizations too find clarity, structure, and direction.
He really has a knack for it.
He does. He can take these big, sometimes really complex challenges and just break them down into simple, understandable steps.
Yeah, think of it like this maybe. If you're feeling totally overwhelmed, maybe too many projects, you don't know where to start, Pankaj is the kind of person who helps you see the bigger picture,
Hmm.
helps you figure out what's really most important, and then create a clear plan to, move forward.
Right, like maybe working with a business team that's kind of struggling to define their goals.
Yeah. Exactly. He'd help them articulate precisely what they want to achieve, how they're going to get there, but in really plain, straightforward language.
And Covey actually kicks off his book talking about a feeling that, well, I think a lot of us can relate to, maybe even you listening right now. It's that sense of being just constantly busy, right?
Yeah.
Juggling so many things,
Mm-hmm.
but wondering deep down if it's all really leading to the kind of impact you're hoping for,
Yeah.
in the long run.
Oh, absolutely. It's so easy to get caught up in that day-to-day rush, isn't it?
Hold up.
Answering emails, going to meetings, tackling whatever pops up, without always having that clear sense of, like, where am I ultimately headed? Are these things actually moving me closer?
Yeah, exactly. So in this deep dive, our goal is really to pull out the core ideas from the 7 habits,
Sure.
the things that can help you gain a clearer understanding of what it means to be truly effective. Effective in, well, all areas of your life, really,
Yeah.
without getting too bogged down in, overly complicated stuff.
Right. We want to give you some practical insights, things you can maybe start thinking about right away.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's really important we say this up front. This discussion, it's definitely not meant to replace reading the book itself.
Oh, absolutely not.
Covey's work is just incredibly rich, it's detailed, and honestly, for a full, deep understanding, we really, really encourage you to pick up a copy. Read it yourself.
Definitely.
Think of this more as maybe a way to get familiar with some of the key concepts. Perhaps spark your interest to explore them further on your own.
Exactly, a starting point.
Hmm.
And with that in mind, let's dive into one of the foundational ideas Covey presents pretty early on.
Yeah.
He talks about this significant shift he observed in, well, how people approach success. He noticed this move away from what he called the character ethic
Mm-hmm.
towards something called the personality ethic. And this distinction, it really struck both of us, I think.
It really did.
And it feels like the right place to begin our exploration with you.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack this a bit. What exactly does Covey mean by this personality ethic? And, how does it differ from the character ethic he talks about?
Right. Well, the personality ethic, which he says really gained traction around the mid-20th century, it tends to focus on those outward-facing aspects.
Like what?
Things like your personality itself, your public image, your attitude, certain behaviors, specific skills and techniques you can use to, well, influence others.
Okay.
Think of it as focusing on appearing successful, how to win people over with charm, or maybe specific communication strategies.
Mm-hmm.
Covey points out that sometimes this can even, veer into manipulation, encouraging people to use techniques just to get others to like them, or maybe even fake interest just to achieve their own goals.
Ah, okay. So it's sort of the difference between genuinely being a trustworthy person, someone with real inner integrity,
Yes.
versus just knowing how to say the right things to maybe make people trust you in a specific moment.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
The character ethic, on the other hand, is all about building that fundamental trustworthiness over time through consistently demonstrating integrity. It's rooted in principles like honesty, humility, courage, fairness,
Mm-hmm.
really who you are at your core.
Right.
The personality ethic might offer you some quick tips, for appearing trustworthy in a meeting,
Sure.
but it doesn't necessarily cultivate that deep internal sense of character. Covey shares this really relatable story, actually, about his own struggles with his son.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, despite trying really hard to be positive and encouraging, using those personality ethic techniques, their efforts just weren't working. They weren't effective. And they eventually realized that their underlying belief, their sort of deep-seated paradigm, that their son was somehow inadequate. That was a real obstacle.
Wow.
Yeah, their superficial positivity just couldn't overcome that fundamental perception.
That brings up a really interesting point for, for you listening to consider. Even when we're trying to use positive communication influence strategies, if our underlying beliefs or perceptions are negative, it can totally undermine our efforts.
Hmm.
It's like that saying, right? Your actions speak so loudly, I can't hear what you're saying.
That's a very insightful way to put it. Yes. And Covey connects this directly to what he calls the law of the harvest.
The law of the harvest. Okay.
Yeah. Basically, in the short term, you might be able to use personality tactics to kind of get by in surface level interactions, maybe charm your way through a quick encounter.
Right.
But in those long-term relationships that really matter, whether they're personal or professional, that lack of deep integrity, that lack of character, it will inevitably come to light.
Right.
It's like a farmer trying to, harvest a crop before even planting the seeds properly.
Yeah.
You just can't expect lasting success in relationships without cultivating that genuine character strength first.
Okay, so the character ethic is the foundation, like the roots of real effectiveness. And the personality ethic is maybe more like the leaves or the branches. You can trim them to look good for a little while, but if the roots aren't strong, the whole tree isn't going to thrive.
Beautifully put.
This seems to lead us perfectly into Covey's first key concept, which really underpins everything else, the power of paradigms.
Yes.
What exactly does he mean by a paradigm?
So Covey defines a paradigm as fundamentally the way you see the world. And importantly, not just in a visual sense, but in how you perceive, understand, and interpret everything around you. He uses a really helpful analogy. Think of your paradigms as maps.
Maps.
Yeah, maps. You have countless maps in your mind. Maps of how things are, that's your perception of reality, and maps of how things should be. Those are your values, your beliefs.
Okay, so these maps aren't necessarily based on like objective truth, but more on our own individual perspectives and assumptions. Is that right?
Precisely. And here's a really crucial insight for everyone listening. The map is not the territory.
The map is not the territory.
Right. A map is just one representation of certain aspects of the territory. So imagine you're trying to navigate Chicago, but you're using a map of Detroit.
Oh.
Right. It doesn't matter how carefully you follow that map or how positive your attitude is. You're just never going to reach your destination in Chicago.
Huh.
The map itself is wrong.
Okay.
Similarly, if your paradigms, your fundamental ways of seeing the world, are flawed or incorrect, then your efforts, your attitudes, no matter how well-intentioned, they just won't lead to the effective results you're looking for.
That makes a lot of sense. So how do these paradigms, these maps, affect how we interact with other people then?
Well, Covey uses this classic Harvard Business School exercise to illustrate it perfectly. Have you heard of the young woman, old woman picture?
Vaguely, yeah. Remind me.
Okay, so he showed one group of people an image that most people initially saw as a young woman. He showed another group an image that was predominantly seen as an old woman. Then he showed everyone a composite image, one that could be interpreted either way.
And what happened?
What was fascinating was that people overwhelmingly continued to see the interpretation they were initially primed with.
Ah.
Yeah, it really demonstrates how even when we're looking at the same objective information, our pre-existing paradigms heavily influence what we actually perceive.
Wow. It's like we each have these internal filters, these lenses that shape our view of reality.
Exactly.
And when someone else sees things differently, our immediate reaction is often to assume they're wrong, rather than considering that maybe they're just looking through a different lens, right?
Absolutely. We have this natural tendency to believe that we see things as they truly are, that our perspective is the objective one. But Covey emphasizes that we actually see the world as we are, or maybe as we've been conditioned to see it.
Right.
So when you encounter someone who disagrees with you, it's often because they are operating from their own unique lens of experience. It might have a different background, different values, different information,
Yeah.
all shaping their perspective.
Okay, so understanding this power of paradigms, recognizing our view isn't the only view, that's the crucial first step. But how do we actually, go about changing these paradigms when we realize they aren't serving us well?
Yeah, good question. Covey talks about paradigm shifts. And you've probably experienced these yourself, those aha moments.
Oh, yeah.
When you suddenly see something in a completely new light, when your understanding just fundamentally changes. He shares historical examples, like the development of germ theory. That dramatically shifted our understanding of disease, right? Led to incredible advancements in healthcare.
Sure. Huge shift.
Or think about the shift from monarchy to democracy in many parts of the world. That changed how people viewed government, unlocked a lot of human potential. But, and this is important, Covey also points out that paradigm shifts aren't always positive.
Right, like the shift to the personality ethic you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. That was a shift, but maybe not one for the better in the long run, according to him.
Okay, so a paradigm shift is a fundamental change in how we perceive and understand the world. And recognizing that these shifts can happen and that our current maps might not be the only or the most accurate way of seeing things, that's really crucial for personal growth, for effectiveness.
Exactly. And this whole understanding of paradigms, it perfectly lays the groundwork for the very first habit Covey introduces.
Which is?
Habit 1, be proactive.
Okay, habit one, be proactive. Now, this sounds simple, but I suspect it's more than just like taking initiative, isn't it? What's the deeper meaning here for
Oh,
us?
absolutely. It's much deeper. Proactivity, according to Covey, is fundamentally about your ability to choose your response to what happens to you. He uses the incredibly powerful example of Viktor Frankl.
The psychiatrist who survived the concentration camps.
That's the one. Even in those horrific conditions, Frankl discovered what he called the last of the human freedoms, which is the freedom to choose one's attitude, one's response, in any given set of circumstances. Even when absolutely everything else is stripped away, you still have that power, the power to decide how you will react.
Wow, that's such a profound image. So it's really not about what happens to us, but truly about how we choose to respond to it.
Exactly. Covey introduces this concept of responsibility. He even breaks the word down. Responsibility. Your ability to choose your response.
I like that.
Yeah, proactive people recognize this inherent responsibility. They don't blame external factors, circumstances, conditions, other people for their behavior. Their actions are a result of their conscious choices based on their values, rather than just being dictated by feelings or external pressures in the moment.
So how does this proactive mindset actually show up in our everyday language? Does it?
It really does. Covey contrasts proactive language with reactive language. Reactive language often transfers responsibility away from yourself.
How so?
Using phrases like, I have to, I can't, or if only. These phrases subtly suggest we're victims of our circumstances, that we don't have a choice.
Okay.
Proactive language, on the other hand, uses phrases like, I choose to, I prefer, I can, I will. This kind of language reflects a sense of agency, of personal accountability.
That's a really subtle but wow, potentially significant shift in mindset for people to consider, isn't it? Moving from feeling like things are happening to you to consciously taking action and making choices about what happens.
Absolutely. And to help illustrate proactivity even further, Covey introduces two concepts, the circle of concern and the circle of influence.
Okay, explain those.
Your circle of concern encompasses, well, all the things you care about or worry about: your health, your job, your kids, politics, the economy, global issues, everything. It can be huge.
Got it.
Within that larger circle, though, is your circle of influence. This includes the things you can actually do something about, the things you can control or directly impact. Proactive people, Covey says, focus the majority of their time and energy squarely on their circle of influence.
That makes perfect sense. Instead of getting bogged down and feeling helpless about things we can't control,
Right.
we should really focus our energy on what's actually within our power to change.
Exactly. Reactive people, conversely, tend to focus on their circle of concern. They constantly dwell on problems they can't solve, weaknesses in other people, circumstances they can't change, which often just leads to feelings of helplessness, blame, and frustration. Covey shares this really relatable example, actually, about working with his son on yard work. Instead of constantly nagging and trying to micromanage his son's actions, which would be focusing on the circle of concern regarding his son's performance, Covey shifted his focus. He focused on his own attitude and actions, his circle of influence. By being patient, being a good example, focusing on his own role as a supportive guide, he eventually saw a positive change in his son's approach without all the conflict.
So it's this inside-out approach, as Covey calls it. We start by changing ourselves, our own responses, our own focus,
Yeah.
and that can then lead to positive changes in our external circumstances or relationships.
Precisely. Proactivity is about taking ownership, owning your life, consciously choosing your responses based on your principles and values, rather than just being driven by external forces or your emotions in the heat of the moment.
That's a really powerful foundation for personal effectiveness. Okay, let's move on then to habit 2. Begin with the end in mind. What's the core idea behind this habit for us to understand?
Begin with the end in mind fundamentally means starting with a very clear understanding of your desired destination, your ultimate destination. It's about knowing where you ultimately want to go so that you can better understand where you are right now and, crucially, ensure that the steps you're taking today are consistently moving you in the right direction.
Okay.
Covey emphasizes this idea that all things are actually created twice.
Twice. How so?
First, there's a mental creation. You envision it, you plan it. Then there's the physical creation. You actually bring it into reality.
Could you give us maybe a practical example of this two creations idea?
Sure. Think about building a house. Before anyone even lays the first brick, there's a detailed mental blueprint, right?
Right. The plans.
Exactly. The architect and homeowner have envisioned the layout, the materials, the purpose of each room. That's the first creation. The actual physical construction, building the house, that's the second creation. It's the process of bringing that mental vision into tangible form.
Okay, I see.
Now, if that first creation, the initial plan, the blueprint is flawed or unclear, then the second creation, the actual house, will very likely be flawed as well, no matter how good the builders are.
Got it. So applying this to our lives then, begin with the end in mind, means basically creating a mental blueprint for our own lives,
Yeah.
defining our core purpose and values.
Exactly. And Covey introduces this really powerful tool for doing that, developing a personal mission statement.
A personal mission statement, like for a company.
Sort of. But for you as an individual, think of it as your own personal constitution. It's a written declaration of what you stand for, what matters most to you, based on those deeply held principles we talked about earlier. This mission statement becomes like an unchanging core, providing you with direction and stability amidst all the constant changes life throws your way. It becomes the foundation for making those big life decisions and even the smaller daily choices.
He also talks about different centers people might have, right? Like being spouse-centered or family-centered or even money-centered.
Right.
How does a principle-centered mission statement differ from those?
That's a great point. Centers like your spouse, your family, or money, they can certainly provide a sense of security and direction, but they're often dependent on external factors, things that are ultimately beyond your direct control. People change. Fortunes change. A principle-centered approach, though, is based on those timeless, universal principles like fairness, integrity, honesty that don't change, regardless of your circumstances. This provides you with a much greater, more stable sense of security, guidance, wisdom, and ultimately true power, because it's rooted in something fundamental and enduring within yourself.
So our personal mission statement should really be aligned with these core principles, and it should also reflect our individual values and the various roles we play in life, I guess.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It needs to be personal to you. Covey shares an example of an executive whose personal mission statement focused on things like integrity, charity, sacrifice, inspiration, and making a positive impact. These are values that go beyond any specific job title or life stage. And he also highlights examples from organizations like IBM back in the day or a particular hotel chain he worked with. When they had a clear, shared mission statement that everyone at every level understood and bought into, it created this incredibly strong sense of shared purpose, shared values, and ultimately exceptional service and results. When everyone knows the why, the alignment is powerful.
It really sounds like having this clear end in mind, this personal constitution, gives you a solid framework for making conscious choices and living a life that's truly aligned with what matters most to you.
That's exactly right. It shifts you from simply reacting to whatever life throws at you to proactively shaping your own path based on your deepest values.
Okay, this leads us nicely into habit 3 then. Put first things first. How does this habit build upon those first two for us?
Right. So habits 1 and 2 are really about that first creation, the mental preparation, the vision, the principles. Habit 1 says you are the creator. Habit 2 is the first creation. Habit 3 is all about the second creation, the physical execution, actually making things happen day to day. It's the practical application.
Okay.
Covey designs effective management as simply putting first things first, while leadership, which really stems from habit 2, knowing your end in mind, decides what those crucial first things are. Management is the discipline of carrying them out, day by day, moment by moment. It's about execution and discipline.
So it's taking that vision, that mission we created in habit 2, and actually having the discipline to implement it in our daily lives, prioritizing based on it.
Exactly. And to help us understand this better, Covey introduces the very famous time management matrix.
Ah, yes, the 4 quadrants.
That's the one. It's a powerful tool. It divides all your activities into 4 quadrants based on 2 factors: urgency and importance. Quadrant 4 is for things that are both urgent and important. Think crises. pressing problems, deadline-driven projects, stuff that demands immediate attention.
Okay.
Quadrant 2 is for things that are not urgent, but crucially are important. This is where things like prevention, relationship building, identifying new opportunities, planning, recreation, and personal development live.
Got it. Not urgent, but important.
Quadrant 3 is for things that are urgent, but not important. These are often interruptions, some meetings, some calls, pressing activities that might seem important, but don't actually contribute to your core mission,
Oh,
often other people's priorities.
right. The urgent, but ultimately trivial stuff.
Exactly. And finally, quadrant 3 is for things that are not urgent and not important. These are basically time wasters, trivia, busy work, some phone calls, excessive relaxation that isn't true recreation.
Okay, the four quadrants. So the key to being truly effective lies in which of these quadrants we spend most of our time and energy, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Covey argues compellingly that highly effective people consciously focus the majority of their time and energy on quadrant 2 activities.
The important, but not urgent ones.
Yes, these are the things that contribute most significantly to your long-term effectiveness, capacity, and goals, even though they don't always feel urgent in the moment. Think of it like doing preventative maintenance on your car. It's not urgent until the car breaks down.
Right.
But doing it regularly, investing that time, actually saves you significant time, money, and stress in the long run. It prevents crises. Similarly, investing time in building stronger relationships, planning strategically for the future, exercising, learning new skills, focusing on your own personal development, these are all quadrant 2 activities that yield substantial long-term benefits for you.
Okay, so to spend more of our precious time in quadrant 2, we really need to learn to effectively say no to things that fall into quadrants 3rd and 4. Even though they might feel pressing, like those urgent emails, or immediately appealing, like scrolling social media in quadrant 4.
Precisely. And saying no to the unimportant ultimately requires having a bigger yes burning inside. A yes to your quadrant 2 priorities, those things that truly align with your mission, your values, your long-term goals.
That makes sense. You need a reason to say no.
Exactly. Covey also introduces this really powerful concept called stewardship delegation as a much more effective way to empower others and free up your own time for those crucial quadrant 2 activities.
Stewardship delegation. How does that work?
Instead of telling someone exactly how to do a task, which he calls gopher delegation, stewardship delegation focuses on clearly defining the desired results. You establish clear guidelines or boundaries they need to operate within, identify the resources available, set up clear accountability standards for how results will be evaluated, and outline the consequences, both good and bad, based on performance. But critically, within that framework, you give the other person the freedom, the stewardship, to decide how the task gets done. You focus on results, not methods.
He shares a really insightful anecdote about delegating the yard work to his son using this approach, doesn't he?
Yes, it's a great example. He found that it led to much better results, a stronger sense of responsibility and ownership in his son, and far less friction than when he was just telling his son exactly what to do every step of the way.
Right.
So shifting from that go for delegation, go for this, go for that, do it this way, to this principle-centered stewardship delegation, it not only empowers others and builds their capability and confidence, but it also significantly frees you up to focus on those higher-level quadrant 2 priorities. By focusing on the what and the why, and then trusting people with the how, you increase both their effectiveness and your own capacity.
Okay, these first 3 habits, being proactive, beginning with the end in mind, and putting first things first, they really lay the groundwork for personal mastery, don't they? Moving you from dependence to independence.
Exactly. Covey calls these the private victories. They're about self-mastery.
Right. Now we're moving into the realm of interdependence, how we interact effectively with others. Starting with habit 4, think win-win. What's the core idea behind this habit for us?
Think win-win is, well, it's a fundamental principle, really a philosophy of human interaction. It encourages you to constantly seek mutual benefit in all of your interactions with other people. It's about striving to find solutions where everyone involved feels like they've gained something valuable, where all parties are genuinely satisfied with the outcome and committed to the plan.
So it's explicitly not about a competitive I win, you lose scenario.
Right.
Or even a sort of self-sacrificing I lose, you win martyrdom approach. It's finding a way for everyone to feel like they've truly won.
Exactly. Covey does briefly outline some of the other common mentalities, like win-lose, very common in our culture. Lose-win, often seen as being nice but leads to resentment. Lose-lose, the result of two stubborn win-lose people colliding. And just plain win, Focus only on getting what you want, regardless of others. And while he acknowledges these might be necessary in very specific, maybe highly competitive, limited situations.
Like a sports game, maybe.
Yeah, exactly, like a
Yeah.
football game. But he argues they're generally not sustainable or effective in most interdependent relationships, where you need ongoing cooperation, trust, and collaboration to succeed long term.
He also introduces the concepts of the abundance mentality versus the scarcity mentality.
Okay.
How do those mindsets relate to think win-win?
That's a crucial distinction. The scarcity mentality operates on the underlying belief that there's only a limited amount of resources, success, recognition, whatever, available. Like there's only one pie.
So if someone else gets a big piece?
It automatically means there's less for you. This mindset naturally leads to competition, defensiveness, a reluctance to share information or resources, and makes it really difficult to find mutually beneficial solutions.
Okay.
The abundance mentality, on the other hand, is the paradigm that there is plenty out there for everybody. There's enough success, enough credit, enough resources to go around. It's not a zero-sum game.
Right.
This mindset fosters collaboration, creativity, sharing, and makes those true win-win solutions much more attainable and likely. You're looking for ways to make the pie bigger for everyone.
And the emotional bank account, which Covey talks about making deposits in relationships, that plays a significant role in fostering a win-win approach too, doesn't it?
Absolutely. A high emotional bank account built through consistent deposits of courtesy, kindness, honesty, keeping commitments, understanding.
Hmm.
It creates a climate of trust. And in that climate of high trust, win-win agreements are just much easier to reach. People are more willing to be open, creative, vulnerable, and explore solutions that genuinely benefit everyone involved when they trust each other.
That makes sense.
Covey also emphasizes something really important. Sometimes the best win-win outcome is actually no deal.
No deal.
Yeah. If you honestly can't find a solution that feels like a true win for both sides, it's often better to agree to disagree amicably, no deal, rather than push for a poor compromise, which is often lose-lose, or force an agreement that will ultimately breed resentment or dissatisfaction for one or both parties down the road. Having no deal as an option takes the pressure off.
He gives a really compelling example, I think, of a banking institution's management training program that shifted to a learner-controlled instruction model. That ended up being a true win-win, right?
Yes, that's a perfect illustration. By shifting the paradigm and creating a win-win agreement where the trainee's goals, finish quickly, learn effectively, aligned with the institution's goals, well-trained managers, efficient use of resources, they unlocked incredible creativity and motivation. The trainees finished in a fraction of the time with even better results. It showed that think win-win isn't just some nice negotiation tactic. It's a fundamental mindset, a philosophy for achieving effective interdependence in all your relationships and systems.
Okay, that leads us quite naturally to habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. This sounds like an absolutely crucial habit for actually achieving those win-win outcomes we just discussed.
Oh, it absolutely is. Habit 5 is truly, I think, at the heart of effective interpersonal communication. Covey emphasizes that our natural human tendency, almost a reflex, is to want to be understood first.
Yeah, I think we all do that.
Right. We often listen with the intent to reply, not to understand. We're already formulating our response, filtering everything the other person is saying through the lens of our own experiences, our own autobiography, our own paradigms.
Right.
But real effectiveness in your relationships, genuine connection, comes from consciously reversing that approach, from genuinely and deeply seeking to understand the other person's perspective, their thoughts, their feelings, their frame of reference, before you even try to make your own point understood. This is what he calls empathic listening.
Empathic listening. Okay, so that's much more than just like hearing the words someone is saying, isn't it?
Way more. Communication experts often say that only a small percentage of our communication is actually verbal, the words themselves, maybe 10% or so.
Really? Only
Yeah.
10%?
Yeah, a significant portion is conveyed through our tone of voice, and even more through our body language. Empathic listening involves listening not just with your ears, but also with your eyes and with your heart. It's about listening for the feeling, for the underlying meaning, the emotion, not just for the literal words being spoken. It requires you to truly try to put yourself in the other person's shoes, to see the world as they see it for a moment.
Covey shares a really poignant anecdote, doesn't he, about a father who was struggling to connect with his teenage son.
Yes, it's a powerful story. The father realized, after much frustration, that he needed to stop trying to give advice, stop trying to fix things based on his own understanding, and instead just truly listen. listened to understand what his son was actually trying to communicate, both verbally and non-verbally. That story beautifully illustrates the power of shifting from that mindset of, oh, I understand because I went through something similar, which is still autobiographical, to genuinely trying to see the world through the other person's unique eyes. Covey outlines different levels of listening, ranging from ignoring someone completely, pretending to listen, selective listening, attentive listening, all the way up to the highest form, which is empathic listening.
And how does empathic listening actually work? Like, what do you do?
It involves skills like reflecting back, not just the content of what the other person is saying, so you're saying that, but also, crucially, reflecting their feelings. It sounds like you're feeling really frustrated about that. It shows that you're not just hearing their words, but you're also understanding or trying to understand their emotions and the deeper meaning behind them. He uses this great example of a father and son having a conversation about school to vividly demonstrate how this approach can provide what he calls psychological air.
Psychological air.
Yeah, like giving the other person space to breathe emotionally. It builds a deep level of trust and makes the other person feel truly heard, truly understood, truly validated, and then they become much more open to listening to your perspective.
But, and this seems really key, it's so important to remember that empathic listening has to be genuine, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely critical.
It can't just be a manipulative technique you use to soften someone up so you can get them to agree with you later on.
Exactly. People can sense that insincerity a mile away. While the specific skills of empathic listening, reflecting, rephrasing are important to learn and practice, they absolutely must stem from a sincere and authentic character, a genuine desire to understand the other person's perspective. When your motive is truly genuine, when you are really trying to understand for understanding's sake, it builds that emotional bank account we talked about. It creates the necessary foundation of trust for finding those mutually beneficial, creative win-win solutions from Habit 4. Seeking first to understand is the absolute key to unlocking Habit 4.
Okay, so much depends on that deep listening. Now we arrive at habit seeds. Synergize. This sounds like it's the culmination, maybe, of all the previous habits working together. What exactly is synergy all about for us?
Synergy is, yeah, in many ways it is the culmination. In its simplest form, synergy just means that the whole is greater than the sum of its individual parts. 1 plus 1 equals 3, or 10, or 100.
Okay.
It's the result you get when you truly value the differences in people's perspectives, when you build on Habit 5, understanding, and Habit 4, win-win, and you work together in a way that creates entirely new possibilities, solutions that are far better, more creative, more effective than what any single individual could have possibly come up with on their own. Covey calls it the highest activity in all of life, actually.
Yeah.
They're the truest test and manifestation of all the other habits working in harmony.
So it's not just basic cooperation, like dividing up tasks. It's more of a creative collaboration where the combined effort produces something significantly greater than just adding up the individual contributions. Is that the idea?
Precisely. Synergy is about actively leveraging the unique strengths, perspectives, and experiences of different people to achieve something truly extraordinary, something new. It's really the essence, he says, of principle-centered leadership and principle-centered parenting, because it unleashes the greatest powers, the highest potential within people. However, Covey also points out that synergy can sometimes feel a little bit scary.
Scary. Why?
Because it inherently involves venturing into the unknown. It means moving beyond the comfort zone of your own individual perspective, your own certainty, and embracing new, different, and sometimes unexpected possibilities that emerge from the interaction. You don't know exactly where it will lead.
He shares a really compelling example, I remember, of a company retreat or meeting where the participants consciously practiced habits 4 and 5, think win-win, and seek first to understand.
Yes, that's a great example. By really digging deep to understand each other's perspectives on a complex problem, they arrived at a completely unexpected and ultimately far better understanding of the real central challenge they were facing. It actually made all of their previously prepared proposals and presentations essentially obsolete because they discovered a deeper issue altogether through synergy.
Wow.
He also uses a more personal, relatable example of a couple who are disagreeing about how to spend their vacation time. One wants to go fishing, the other wants to visit her sick mother.
Right, a common kind of conflict.
Exactly. Now, a compromise might be splitting the time, maybe, but that could leave both feeling somewhat unsatisfied, right? A bit lose-lose. But through the process of synergy, really understanding the underlying needs and desires behind each person's position, Habit 5, and committing to find a solution that works for both, Habit 4, they might discover a creative third alternative, something
Yeah,
completely different that beautifully meets both of their underlying needs in a way they hadn't initially considered.
that makes sense. Finding something better than either original idea. He also talks about something called intrapersonal synergy, synergy within ourselves. What does that concept mean for us?
Intrapersonal synergy is about consciously integrating the different aspects of yourself. Particularly, he talks about integrating the logical, analytical left brain and the intuitive, creative, holistic right brain. When you can effectively tap into both your analytical and your creative capacities, when you learn to value both logic and intuition within yourself, you achieve a greater level of inner effectiveness, wisdom, and wholeness.
Okay.
Covey shares an interesting anecdote about a company president who had this aha moment, realizing the direct application of this concept to improving communication within his own marriage. He tended to be very left brain, logical, analytical,
Mm-hmm.
while his wife operated much more from right brain intuition and feeling. By learning to value and integrate those different ways of processing information within himself and in their interactions, they achieved much greater understanding and synergy in their relationship.
So ultimately, achieving synergy in all its forms with others, within ourselves, fundamentally relies on truly valuing differences, not just tolerating them, seeing differences as strengths, as opportunities.
Exactly. Valuing differences is the essence of synergy.
Okay, this brings us finally to this seventh habit, habit 7, sharpen the saw. This sounds like it's all about maintenance, about keeping ourselves going.
That's exactly right. Sharpen the saw is the habit of self-renewal. It's the principle of taking time out for balanced self-renewal across 4 key dimensions of your life: the physical, the spiritual, the mental, and the social-emotional. Covey uses that simple but really powerful analogy of a woodcutter who's working tirelessly sawing down a tree but making less and less progress because he never takes the time to actually sharpen his saw.
Right, he's too busy sawing.
Exactly. He thinks he doesn't have time. But of course, stopping to sharpen the saw would actually make him far more effective in the long run. Similarly, you are the instrument. You need to regularly renew yourself in these 4 essential dimensions to maintain and enhance your long-term effectiveness, your energy, your ability to practice all the other 6 habits, and, crucially, to prevent burnout.
Okay, let's quickly break down these 4 dimensions for us. What does physical renewal practically involve?
Physical renewal involves taking care of your physical body. That means regular exercise that you enjoy, paying attention to proper nutrition and diet, getting sufficient rest, and managing stress effectively. It's about preserving and enhancing your physical capacity to work, to adapt to challenges, and just to truly enjoy life. Covey acknowledges it could be the hardest one to get started on if you've neglected it, but it's definitely a high-leverage quadrant 2 activity. It impacts everything else.
Makes sense. And what about spiritual renewal? What does that look like? Is it about religion?
Not necessarily religion, though it can be for some. Spiritual renewal is broader. It's about connecting with your core values, your center, the sources of your inner strength and meaning, your commitment to your value system. This might involve practices like meditation, prayer, spending quiet time in nature, immersing yourself in great literature or music, clarifying your personal mission statement, anything that inspires you and connects you to your deepest self. Covey shares that insightful anecdote about the doctor who prescribed his stressed-out patient a day of complete solitude and reflection at the beach
Yeah.
as a way to reconnect with what truly mattered. And Viktor Frankl's powerful emphasis on finding purpose and meaning in life, even in suffering, deeply connects with the spiritual dimension too.
Okay. What does mental renewal entail for us then?
Mental renewal involves the ongoing process of educating yourself,
Yeah.
learning, reading widely and deeply, writing, thinking critically, planning, visualizing. It's about continuously expanding your mind, keeping it sharp, and cultivating a lifelong love for learning. Covey highlights the importance of moving beyond just passive entertainment, like endless TV, and being selective about the media you consume, actively choosing sources that both inform and inspire you, that challenge your thinking.
Got it. Continuous learning. And finally, what about social and emotional renewal? How do we sharpen that part of the saw?
Social and emotional renewal focuses on developing and nurturing meaningful connections with other people. It's about making consistent deposits in the emotional bank accounts of your key relationships. It involves practicing empathy, habit 5, seeking mutual benefit, habit 4, contributing meaningfully through service to others in your community or family. Covey quotes N. Eldon Tanner, who said that service is the rent we pay for the privilege of living on this earth.
That's powerful.
He also touches upon the significant concept of scripting others. Here, Recognizing the often unconscious ways our own perceptions and beliefs about others can powerfully influence how we treat them and ultimately how they see themselves and behave. Renewing ourselves socially emotional helps us provide better scripts. And Covey emphasizes the vital importance of the daily private victory, doesn't he? What's that?
Yes, the daily private victory is about consciously dedicating time each day, even just an hour, to renewal across these four dimensions. Maybe some exercise, some quiet reflection or planning, some reading, some focus on key relationships. He sees this consistent, balanced self-renewal as the fundamental key, the engine, for developing all the seven habits and truly becoming principle-centered in your life. It provides the energy and capacity.
And this consistent renewal creates what Covey calls the upward spiral of growth. As you learn more, mental, make conscious commitments based on your conscience, spiritual, and then actively do physical, you progressively move to increasingly higher levels of understanding, effectiveness, and fulfillment. Social emotional. He shares a personal anecdote near the end about his own deepening conversations with his wife, Sandra, and how working through a seemingly minor issue involving a household appliance, the Frigidaire hang-up, as he called it, through the lens of habits 4, 5, and 6, led them to a much richer, more synergistic understanding in their relationship. It's an example of that upward spiral in action.
Right.
Achieving true unity and effectiveness through the seven habits isn't some one-time fix or a final destination you arrive at. It's really an ongoing, continuous process of learning, growth, commitment, and renewal. Sharpening the saw, keep the whole process going.
Okay, wow. So just to try and briefly summarize this incredibly insightful deep dive into Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People for everyone listening. We've explored that crucial shift away from focusing just on surface-level personality techniques towards building a strong, enduring foundation of character.
The character ethic.
Right. We've examined the profound impact of our paradigms, our mental maps, and how they shape our perception of reality, and the importance of being open to paradigm shifts.
Absolutely fundamental.
And then we've delved into the 7 interconnected habits themselves, starting with the private victories, be proactive, habit 1, begin with the end in mind, habit 2, and put first things first, habit 3. These build self-mastery, moving us from dependence to independence.
Yes.
Then we moved into the public victories, the habits of effective interdependence. Think win-win, habit 4. Seek first to understand, then to be understood, habit 5. And finally, synergize, habit 6.
Creating something greater together.
Exactly. And all of this entire framework is underpinned and enabled by the essential practice of continuous self-renewal through habit 7. Sharpening the saw across those 4 dimensions, physical, spiritual, mental, and social emotional.
Yeah, that interconnectedness of the habits is really the key takeaway, I think. They aren't just a random list. They build upon one another in a logical progression, moving you from dependence to independence, and ultimately to effective interdependence, all grounded in those fundamental principles of character and integrity. Understanding your own paradigms, taking full responsibility for your choices through proactivity, having that clear vision for your life, prioritizing effectively, seeking mutually beneficial outcomes, understanding others deeply before seeking to be understood, creating synergy, and committing to continuously renewing yourself. These are all just vital components of achieving greater personal and interpersonal effectiveness in your life.
Absolutely. And maybe as you listening take these ideas with you, perhaps you could consider just one specific area in your own life. Where could making a conscious shift in your paradigm, or maybe focusing intently on practicing just one of these 7 habits, potentially make a significant positive difference for you right now?
A great question to reflect on.
Yeah, what might shift for you if you approached a challenging relationship with a genuine, sincere desire to understand first before jumping in with your solution? Or what if you made a deliberate effort this week to carve out just a little more time for those important but not immediately urgent quadrant 2 activities?
It really is a journey.
It truly is a journey of continuous growth and ongoing reflection. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive today.